I'm here with Morgan State University and media studies scholar Dr. Jared Ball. Ball is the creator of I Mix What I Like.org and the author of I Mix What I Like, a mixtape manifesto. He is also the co-editor of Alive Reinvention, correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X. Dr. Ball, how are you doing today?
I'm as good as could be expected. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You have a new book, that the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. You caused the uproar on social media. Can you talk a little bit about the book?
The book, the short of it is it's looking to explain the mythology and the history and the current development of the argument and the misunderstanding popularly of what buying power is and is not. And there's a critique of capitalism and Black capitalism as solutions to the inequality that Black people continue to suffer. So some of the uproar is, what I will quickly note, is almost exclusively coming from people who have not read the book and who have not much of an understanding of the argument or the context or the history or the details. So I will say to and stop here, but I'm as a positive encouragement to people to engage the work, want to continue to point out that there has been zero, to my knowledge, not one published or produced critique of any kind of my work from anyone who's actually read it. So whether that's the academic community or elsewhere. So so yes, some of the buzz around social media is largely around what I think is misunderstood about what I'm arguing.
Right. And it's basically a lie that's been perpetuated, for years, the myth of Black buying power, that if we would just mobilize our dollars together, that would be able to do enough to solve the inequality, in the wealth gap. And that's not true.
Correct. I mean, so essentially, buying power is a marketing and advertising phrase that is meant to help corporations target their ad revenue. And buying power is not something that measures income. It's not something that measures wealth. It is what, in the words of those who produce the so-called studies, are estimates and projections based on surveys of what Black people spend their money on when they go shopping. The popularity of the phrase buying power has been turned into a misunderstanding of a non-existent economic strength. So people will often hear Black people have $1.6 trillion. And if we were to save our money or spend it more wisely or spend it among Black businesses, we could close the gaps in inequality in income and wealth, et cetera, and so forth. And that is part of the mythology. It's entirely untrue. That $1.6 trillion number is itself an estimate or projection based on spending, and is not a measurement of people's debt, people's income, their access to investment, their access to venture capital, or to wealth creating spaces or sectors of the economy if they're in business. And it's what mostly my work is showing and arguing. It is itself connected to a long history of those in power in this country trying to encourage Black people to struggle in ways that it is understood by those in power can never lead to actual liberation. So Black capitalism in particular, buying Black, banking Black, circulating the Black dollar, all of these are subsidiary myths of the capitalist logic that tells Black people you don't need political power, you don't need radical organization or analysis or perspectives. You just need to engage in a form of capitalism that is understood by those in power cannot work and has been proven to not work. So a lot of what I summarize in my own work are the data and the research that shows this is not just an opinion. This is not just, I believe this. This is, again, demonstrable fact.
Right. And you believe the solution is political action. Can you talk about how political action could solve these problems?
So what I briefly argue in the book is that that real power is political power. It's the ability, and by that I don't mean simply voting for whatever Democrat or Republican we're told to every so often, but political power that is the ability to, as Huey Newton once said, define phenomena and have it act in the desired manner, or that is to have control over public policy, to be able to determine what is wealth, how wealth is created, and how it's ultimately distributed. That's political power. And the only way we really can access that is through radical political organization and the involvement of many of us in movements and efforts to guarantee outcomes as opposed to quote unquote opportunity. So that's what I think we should be focused on. Instead of this mythological estimate and guess around buying power, we should be looking at the very real 22 trillion dollar GDP. That is the value of wealth created for businesses in society, or even more, we should be looking at the 150 to 190 trillion dollars in private personal wealth that we're creating. All of us are creating, but is redistributed only to the top 0.1% of the population in this country and around the globe. That should be what we should be politically organizing to say, look, there's all this wealth we're creating. When we consume, why is it that only the business owner is valued as superior when their customers are just as important to the process of exchange that creates the wealth that ends up only in the hands of a tiny few? So in other words, I'm saying when you and I pay our bills, when we go shopping, when we go to the store, when we do what we're doing here, we're creating revenue, we're creating wealth that is again distributed upwards. And all I'm saying is we shouldn't have to be the perfect business people. We shouldn't have to be the best, most brilliant economic minds to realize, listen, $150 trillion is created in personal wealth. Why isn't it distributed differently? Why is it only going to a handful of people? Why aren't I benefiting and you benefiting as much? And so what I'm trying to show in my work is that buying power is part of the mythology that is created to make sure that you and I don't ask those questions and start really advocating for real power.
100%. And you bring up like, some valid points on Instagram. I was looking at your page like before the interview, and you were talking about like, 10 million tax dollars are given to Israel every single day. And why do your taxes pay for Israel healthcare and Palestinian genocide?
I mean, again, this is sort of my point. If 100, I think, well, 14 billion most recently, but I think it's upwards, it's approaching 100 billion has been raised for Israel just since October 7th.
Wow.
Where did that money come from?
Yeah.
Why are you and I being told to circulate our dollar and to set up a small business when those in power just redirect through public policy? They set a law or they set a new policy item, and they just say, oh, here's a new bill. We're gonna send money over here. We're gonna send money over there. Well, great. So then wipe out everybody's debt. Let's start creating bills that fund construction companies to improve everybody's housing and to improve everybody's communities and to fix our water and to fix our public transportation. I mean, this is what but instead we're being told to fight against one another, to look at immigrants as the blame, to look at Palestinian, I mean, whatever. This handful of people got all this money and we've created it. We've created the wealth. We've already done it. So let's stop being distracted by, as I'm calling it, this mythology and propaganda around buying power, and let's get serious about how the economy really works and what we really need to be doing to get to change it.
In the book, you also talk about like, the corporatization of hip hop. It's a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. Could you talk about like, how hip hop celebrities play a role in the suppression of social movements?
Well, celebrities have long. That's why I've often said you can't be rich famous and radically political at the same time. And there
Right.
is no historical exception to that rule. That popularity is political, fame is political. They are the celebrities are themselves, regardless of what we think of their talent, they are reflections of the ruling elite who own these industries, who own these corporations, who own the advertising and the mechanisms that popularity requires. You can't you can't not only become famous but stay famous without that being sanctioned by those who own these monopolist corporations, these platforms, and if you just look back historically, celebrity has always been used to political end, to produce and to manage and to popularize certain ideas. So that's why. So hip hop, of course, being produced by a colonized population here in the United States is going to reflect that same pattern. And the form of it that becomes most popular is going to be a form that speaks against the interests of the people in the communities that produced it. That's why, as we've looked back at this 50th anniversary of hip hop, we see that the communities that produced and originated hip hop are as poor today as they were in the 1970s when hip hop emerged, with the South Bronx still literally being listed as one of the poorest and worst counties and districts in the country. So, what are we celebrating? All that's been done is wealth has been created again for that same handful of a ruling elite. A few more Black celebrities have been produced and then used to popularly defend capitalism, and Black capitalism is a subset of that, and buying power and other forms of bank Black, buy Black, and circulate the dollar mythology that has been targeted and weaponized against us for the last 150 years, most immediately in this country.
Yeah, you make some good points. I think like the counter side to that argument would be, though, that hip hop has stood up for, Black lives for decades, even though like there's been no meaningful change. Like, is that pretty much like what your conclusion would be?
In all that is produced in the world, hip hop, like most other art, has reflected the real struggles and attitudes of oppressed people. But the popular commercial form has increasingly been turned into a weapon of colonization. So the popular form of rap music and hip hop as a cultural expression, which isn't even acknowledged for all of its elements anymore, almost exclusively works in service of oppressive forces. So I mean, or and worse, more complicated in a more sophisticated way today, it's used to produce a symbolic radicalism, a neoliberal rebranding of radicalism that again encourages people back to the same. So just like we saw post George Floyd,
Right.
There's an increased uprising, increased rebellion, then more money is dropped on Black ownership and Black organizations, Black nonprofits, their white sponsors, and a lot of money specifically from the corporate world targeting the Black community with financial literacy solutions and entrepreneurialism solutions. And the repositioning of pundits, rappers, artists, etc., who would continue that logic. Just today, I was reading an article in the Washington Post that was talking about the realities of what Killer Mike's was promoting as the Greenwood Bank Project.
Right.
And if you look at what's happening today, those of us who were calling this out from the beginning are proven correct, that it is an empty, fraudulent rebranding of Black capitalist logic that has exploited literally Black people's money, but also, I think more importantly, damaged what should be the goal here in helping Black people and others understand how the actual economy works, and what Black people's relationship to that economy actually is, and what we actually should be doing to change it, which is not banking and circulating dollars and entrepreneurialism, but engaging ourselves in radical political organization and seeking actual political power.
Most definitely. And I think you bring up like, some really good points. You mentioned Killer Mike, and I can't help but think of Cesar Pena. I remember seeing like videos like where Killer Mike was like, seemingly giving an endorsement of Cesar Pena, who like, was involved in a real estate scam, obviously DJ Envy of the Breakfast Club. And like you see like all of these black people going to these seminars hoping to like, solve their financial problems, like, create some wealth, and they're being scammed. What are your thoughts about like that?
This is what I and some of my comrades have been arguing about for years now. That's why Killer Mike and I had our exchange. That's why.
Oh, you actually had an exchange with Killer Mike. What do you?
Oh yeah, we've had one going back a couple of years, where essentially, the short of it is he was misunderstanding my argument, holding up my book, and look, there's the shameless plug. People should go to our YouTube channel. I Mix What I Like at Black Power Media and check out. You could see all about it and more. But the short of it is he was misunderstanding the argument and misunderstanding this point about Black capitalism as a solution, and championing himself as the modern day extension of the civil rights movement, while promoting Greenwood Bank and Black banking and Black entrepreneurial initiatives as a response to uprisings, literally coming out, being called by the mayor in Atlanta, telling Black people in the streets, don't rebel, don't hurt your community, don't burn up businesses, go back and support Black businesses. So he's always had this Black capitalist logic and argument to his, and he's promoted as such. This is why he's industry friendly. He's in many ways a perfect example of what I'm talking about. He has plenty of talent and the ability to present himself through his music and elsewhere as someone who is doing the modern day Black liberation thing, but he's representing a very white conservative capitalist logic wrapped in Black radical political presentation and performance. And that's what is,
I mean, it's
really
commonplace. It is a lot of other artists like I could think of that fit that bill. I won't name like any of them, but like, I definitely like, see a lot of like rappers, perpetuating themselves as academic scholars and putting out misinformation a lot. Like have you seen that, and like how dangerous is that to the Black community?
So part of my argument with my own work is what I'm trying to argue, and I somewhat explicitly say, is that we have a problem, and I've even was saying to my students this semester, we have a civilizational crisis level problem with methodology. And by that I mean we really need to be checking ourselves on how are people reaching, or how am I, how do I know what I know, and how do I like what I like, is what I ask my students as literally every semester. How am I reaching my conclusions? What steps have I taken to make the claims that I'm making? Have I really read this? Do I really understand what I'm talking? And that's really what I think is as much of a problem here, and as much of a problem that celebrities and even some who have the academic credentials, such as Boyce Watkins, who has a PhD in economics that he's happy to tell everybody about, but he also wildly misunderstands how the economy works and what Black people's relationship to it is. So, and I think because he himself, as I've told him just this past week, called him out for, as he was falsely representing my work. You haven't done what a scholar would do, which is actually read the work and produce peer-reviewed responses, scholarly academic journal or whatever scholarly responses.
I think like when I look at like Dr. Boyce,
and that is, I think, is a major problem. Yeah,
he seems like that he posts like for clickbait. It seems like to the shocking claims. It doesn't seem like it's a lot of scholarly back, like and that's common like across the board. You could look at like different conservatives where it's like they're just posting, they're playing algorithm games for like engagement.
It's not just conservatives; liberals do it too. And I think this is why we need real radical and revolutionary politics and analyses. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. That especially when it comes to these issues around race, class, and economics, the methods being used are really insufficient. They're a mess to be. So that's, and again, just to bring it back to where we started, the point that I'm showing in my book is that if you look at where the claims of buying power come from, I'm showing the origins, I'm showing the bad methodology that journalists are taking and why they're likely taking the positions that they're taking and making the flaws, the mistakes that they're making, um, and showing methodologically where they are insufficient and where we need to improve if we want to understand how all of this is working. And that is, again, race, class, and media. We really need to step up our game because it's ever more sophisticated and slick and dangerous and damaging.
Dr. Jared Ball, thank you so much for taking the time. I wanted to ask you one last question. It was about Mumia Abu-Jamal. You know, he's an activist journalist who was convicted of murder and sentenced to death in 1982 for the 1981 murder of Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner. You know, he's 69 years old. Do you think, like, you know, there's a possibility that, like, you know, he can die in the free world?
What I will say is I'm glad you raised him and his as an issue. I don't know what his chances are for getting out. The ruling recently of the judge in Philadelphia, the Black woman judge in Philadelphia, makes the likelihood of him getting out. But I'm not an expert on his case, and I'm not a lawyer, but it just makes it look less likely.
Right.
But I will say that people should check out Prison Radio. They should check out Mark Lamont Hill's new recurring podcast with Mumia. They should definitely go to our Black Power Media YouTube channel and check out all the work we have around Mumia, the MOVE movement, political prisoners, the Black Liberation Army. All of those histories are no more well covered and discussed than on our platform, and that's just I think an objective fact. And I would encourage people to get involved. My homeboy, Dr. Todd Stephen Burrows, Dr. Lynn Washington, and so many around the Mumia case and movement. Their work should be researched and paid attention to. They've been on our platform. But yeah, I absolutely. My levels of optimism are irrelevant. We should be doing much more to get Mumia and all the other political prisoners out while we can, and be prepared to get the newer crop that's being created and will be created as political prisoners are going to need struggles around their freedoms as well.
Definitely. Dr. Jared Ball, the author of The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, Media, Race, and Economics. Thank you so much for the time.
Anytime. Thank you very much. Peace. Thank you.